Warning. This show features dark subjects which may be triggering to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Chaos Jar.
Setting the standards.
I am the loud and obnoxious one, J Wes Secord. Hey. Over here is our host and big bag of facts, Bad Ben.
Hey.
And as always, we are followed by our good friend A.T. Token.
At a slightly further distance than usual.
As usual, you make sure to like, subscribe, rate, and review. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at BAChaosJar. You can follow me on Twitter and, ask me questions at I'm Glad You Asked _ You can also follow us on Facebook at Chaos Jar Podcast. Wait, is it Chaos Jar Podcast? Yeah, okay. Chaos Jar Podcast, which, by the way, is also the name of our YouTube channel. Say you got some friends who just aren't into the podcast scene, but they kind of want to listen, send them over there. You'll have a whole blast. And you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/chaosjar. And if you give us a bit of money, we'll give you early access to our bonus episodes, The Overflow. Plus, you can just watch the episodes that are already out right there. Now, as for our show, what's going in the jar today, Ben?
Well, today we're going to talk about the man who killed Halloween.
The holiday?
Yeah, the holiday.
We can kill concepts now?
You can kill things.
Yeah.
Everyone can kill things.
You kill jokes all the time.
It's my specialty.
All right. So before we talk about that, let's talk about when you guys were, as you guys were little, when you used to go trick-or-treating. Did you used to hear those myths all the time about how people put needles in candies or razor blades in apples or poison candies?
Just candy corn.
We actually did have razor blades and candy in my hometown.
I can assure you that's probably not true.
There was an actual thing that happened. It was really bad.
According to any source on the internet that I've ever found, there is no confirmed cases of any candy tampering happening ever that led to actual injuries.
When I was 8, cops went out looking, but there was never...
Yeah, and there's actually people who X-ray candies. And it's funny because a mutual friend of ours told us the same thing, and when I showed her the articles that state that even though it's reported on the night of Halloween, by 2 days later, all those reports are turned down as not true. They're always turned out. It's never a real thing. Now, that's not to say it doesn't happen and isn't reported, but at the same time, it's not something that's actually out there, ever. It's actually, there are certain things, for instance, there was the needles in a candy jar was actually found in 1982. Not a candy jar, in a Snickers bar was found in 1982. But nobody was seriously injured in that. The kid took a bite in, felt the prick, and pulled his hand out. But nothing has ever come from these actual things. Outside of, there are a few stories, but still they weren't anything that was
an epidemic. It's a single incident.
Nothing that caused permanent or serious or debilitating injuries.
I'm not sure if that happened, but I do know that our city actually legit had to have closed Halloween's.
That's actually a precaution that's been happening since 1974 because of this story.
Right.
What? No way.
Yes. So I say that it never has happened, but this case is what sets the precedent for this.
Well, in which case, I feel like I've been partially lied to and partially told the truth.
I grew up with this for a very long time as well. My mom was very paranoid about, everything. We had to, extensively go through our candy if anything was even remotely out of sort, looked like it was tampered, looked like anything had happened at all, it was immediately chucked out. If it was a homemade thing, like homemade brownies, thrown out.
See, in my case, it was only 1 year that it ever was a thing, because I guess I think it was a group of teenagers started passing these candies out type of thing.
Maybe they were trying to replicate something, but
yeah, but aside from that, growing up, I never heard these myths. It only happened one year where something happened. I
grew up with these myths all the time because my mom and my dad completely believed in these things. Some small little notes to happen around that. In 1959, a California dentist, William Shine, gave candy-coated laxative pills to trick-or-treaters by accident. And he was charged with outrage of public decency and unlawful dispensing of drugs.
I mean... handing out these shits.
Kind of business is he runsing here? That was really bad. Please delete that, Secord. Kind of business is he? Kind of business is he? Kind of business is he? Kind of business is he runsing here? Runsing.
In 1964, a disgruntled Long Island, New York woman gave out packages of inedible objects to children who she believed were too old to be trick-or-treating. The packages contained items such as steel wool, dog biscuits, and ant buttons, which were clearly labeled as poison, so they're the little pop-out things that you put out for ants to...
Oh, okay.
Nobody was injured. She was prosecuted, pleaded guilty to endangering children, even though she was handing it out to people like older kids.
Still minors.
The same year, reports of lye-filled bubble gum were handed in Detroit and rat poison in Philadelphia, but these were never substantially linked at all.
What were in the bubblegum? Because I heard lye-filled.
Lye-filled.
Like the chemical?
Like the chemical lye.
Oh, okay. Because all I'm thinking is they're like bubble, like
I put all my
Bazooka
lye.
Joes, and you live it up. Your parents don't love you.
You're a loner.
Climate change is a hoax. They're just.
That's the new fortune cookie.
Yeah, they're just like all they're filled with is lies.
So another notable little one that happened in 1970. It was reported in the New York Times that Halloween goodies that children collect this weekend on their rounds of trick-or-treating may bring them more horror than happiness, and provided examples of tampering, but nothing that was ever actually linked to any official police documents, medical records, or anything. So they basically just spread out this hoax even more in 1970. So one of the things that makes these reports really, really huge is the Chicago Tylenol murders, where Tylenol tablets were replaced with cyanide. And I thought about doing an episode on it, but I don't really want to because it's a very weird, it doesn't really have much of a timeline to it, and it doesn't really, there's not a lot to it kind of thing.
Maybe we can discuss it a little bit more with this episode at the end.
The person who was involved in it just added poisons to over-the-counter medications, basically. So they were like just putting poisons inside of these medications. There's actually a lot of work that's gone into debunking these myths. Joel Best, a sociologist at the University of Delaware, has done a study on this. He collected newspapers from 1958 to 1983 in search of evidence of candy tampering, and fewer than 90 of these actually showed any actual signs of tampering, and in none of the cases were they random, and none of the cases did they actually do any real harm to the children.
So it's all targeted pranks, really.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You know, by announcing these things on, like, in the public and the government making these examples is annoying, because if you don't have evidence of it, you're just putting the idea into people who could do its heads.
Yeah. It does say in here that there are some of these things that were sent out by kids trying to get attention, so like teenagers pulling pranks. So that might be more towards what happened in your city, because you said that it was more like kids handing these things out.
All I know is people were thinking it might have been teenager pranks and stuff like that, but it was like one bad year where we actually were scared. Aside from that, the rest of the time, we've never had that problem.
The worst thing is I come from a really rural area, so if anybody was to try and do this, they'd be like, well, what house did you go to? Yeah. Who'd you visit? Like, also, any of these things about people putting drugs in candies, like we're going to give kids edibles and LSD, that's fucking expensive, man. Like, fuck.
Kids need to have fun too, man.
So there are some misattributed poisoning deaths that happen on Halloween. So, for instance, in 1970, Kevin Toston, a 5-year-old from Detroit, died after finding and eating his uncle's heroin. And they attributed it to candy at first, and then realized that it was because his uncle's a heroin addict and he ate that.
Jeez. What? Did they ever explain why he ate it?
Well, the family attempted to protect the uncle by claiming the drug was sprinkled in the child's Halloween candy, but it's probably that he found it, and because heroin is kind of like a rocky sort of thing, or even if it was melted down a liquid, he might think like it might look like something he might want to, and plus kids are weird, and he's 5.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, I see that.
In 1978, Patrick Wyderhald, a 2-year-old boy from Flint, Michigan, died after eating Halloween candy. However, toxicology tests found no evidence of poison. His death was determined to be due to natural causes, so he's probably allergic to something inside of the candies.
It could have also been very overweight, and parents should not have let him eat that candy.
Yep. In 1990, Ariel Kaz, a 7-year-old girl from Santa Monica, California, died while trick-or-treating. Early press reports claimed poison candy, despite her parents telling the police that she had previously been diagnosed with a serious medical condition and an enlarged heart, which was an actual cause of death. So she probably got scared to death, which I could believe happened because on my street, the one Halloween, they literally had tricked out their house, like, really, really nicely, and I was, like, 14. I didn't even think anything of it, and I was there just knocking on the door because their dog had ran away.
Yeah.
And the guy the actor they hired, and, like, all the makeup and effects that he had on him, when he opened the door, I, like, jumped their fucking porch because he was just there with this giant-ass scythe, and I was like, what the fuck? And,
Bam! I remember at one point we actually had a guy on one of our streets, and he was dressed as Jason, and he was in a small gated area in the front lawn, and he just didn't move. Like, legit, he held his position, and then someone got close, and he went, and he, like, just, he just, like, moved at them, and then and everyone freaked out, because he was standing so still, right? Like, he did such a good job. I bet you he works as one of those statues.
It's funny because I went to a house delivering pizzas around Halloween at one point. Like, I think it was the day of Halloween. And when I showed up at the house, they had like a life-size Michael Myers mannequin. But because this is Halloween, I'm standing there trying to figure out if I can notice any movement at all in this thing. And then finally, when the woman came to the door, out, she was just like, it's not a real thing. It's just a mannequin. And I was like, you absolutely certain about that? Because I did not feel like stepping forward because I will hit him. Like, I will fucking just... So when I did go forward, this guy did not move. So if he was a guy, he probably heard I was going to hit him and decided that he didn't want to do this.
Actually, now that you've mentioned that, it was Michael Myers. This guy was dressed up on my thing. So sorry, yeah. That makes me think of that like old video where the guy jumps out of the trash can and scares his buddy and he punches him in the face. Anyway, so where were we?
One last one. In 2001, a 4-year-old girl from Vancouver, British Columbia, died after eating some Halloween candy. However, there was no evidence of poisoned candy, and she actually died of streptococcus infection. Mm. So she had an infection prior to this and died of that instead of the candy. So, like I said, there's no proof of these things, really. It's a real big myth. There might be, like, little things or whatever, but nobody's actually been completely debilitated or dead from these types of things.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of... I've never heard of anybody actually dying.
Yeah. Well, so like I said, it's never happened
Candy shit.
never happened except for this particular case.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at the fact that he ignored most of it except for candy shits.
Everything else went out the window.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about Ronald Clark O'Brien.
I feel like I know him.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
What year were you born? Yeah.
1890.
Okay. So, Ronald Clark O'Brien was born October 19th, 1944. He was born in Texas, but it doesn't state what city in Texas or where. It just states Texas. He was the son of William Anthony O'Brien and Elsie Lane Legrone. There aren't many details at all.
That was a nice little burp you put under there. I love your little, I'm going to just hide it.
There aren't many details about his upbringing. However, Elsie died January 4th, 1954 at the age of 40, which would have made Ronald 9 when his mom died. His father then remarried and lived a very long life, dying at the age of 90 in 2002, outliving one of his sons and 2 of his grandsons. So, Ronald eventually married a woman named Danine, and they had 2 children. I know, it's a really odd name.
That is really odd. I was about to say stupid. But someone's going to hear it and get insulted.
Hey, that's my name!
I'm Danine!
So, they had 2 children, Timothy, born April 5th, 1966, and Elizabeth, born 1969. The family lived in Deer Park, Texas, where Ronald worked as an optician at Texas State Optical in Sharpstown, Houston. And he's an optician, so he was also a deacon at the Second Baptist Church, where he sang in the choir and ran the local bus program for the church. So he was described as a model citizen. One pastor described him as a good Christian man and an above-average father. I love that they didn't say a great father or above average.
He said hi to them.
You'd think a father would be about here. He was about here.
Well, in a time when it was encouraged to hit your kids, he probably was like, it didn't really strike him very much, you know.
Wow. He strikes his kids 3 or 4 times less than the average dad.
Hey, no scars. That you can see.
It's that whole time period, right? Back then, if your kid was misbehaving, they parents would encourage you to beat them up, and then if the kid came home and was like, they hit me, they'd be like, what'd you do? It wasn't like today where if you hit somebody's kid, they're gonna be like, yo, why'd you touch my kid?
Yeah.
Not saying either is right, but come on.
I think that's why we're kind of laughing at it, is how ridiculous the idea of it is.
So, October 31st, 1974, Ronald took his children out trick-or-treating in Pasadena, Texas. In all the years previously, Ronald was not interested in this activity. He kind of got bored. But this year he chose to take the kids with his neighbor Jim Bates and Jim's 2 kids. So I guess maybe his buddy was like, come on, let's go.
Sneak a can of beer.
Yeah, they're probably having a good time.
And their kids are going, they're like, yep.
So they were having a great time until they reached a house on the block that wasn't answering. The kids grew impatient, so Jim and the 4 children went ahead, but Ronald stayed behind. A few minutes later, Ronald cut up saying that a man had answered the door, but he had not turned on the light of the house. He cracked the door so that only one hairy arm could slide out and handed him 5 21-inch pixie sticks.
I didn't know we were doing the Bigfoot episode already.
Wow.
That's a dealer.
Yeah.
What I love is that the Sam Shepard episode and the wild bushy man and the hairy arm for this one, and it's quoted as hairy arm. I love it.
We're definitely getting a theme.
Yeah.
Where next week we're doing.
Someone's just gonna sketch me one day.
A hairy guy.
So I'm just gonna say this right now. First of all, light out on the porch normally means nobody's giving out candy. It used to mean that we've run out of candy or we're not doing it this year, so then you would just not bother that house.
Yeah.
Why they went there, who knows? And then if my kids go ahead with my neighbor and then all of a sudden the door cracks open and one arm reaches out and hands me 5 pixie sticks, I'm not cool with this.
I'm not cool with the fact that it's a big hairy arm either.
So, he handed...
It's actually just Bernard.
Yeah.
Oh, here you go. Sorry, it took me a bit of a while.
I was looking for these.
I was chatting with my good chaps, the fish.
So he handed a pixie stick to each of the kids. There's 5. There's 5 of these, but 4 kids. So each one got one. And then after returning home, he handed out the 5th one to a local 10-year-old boy that he recognized from his church, who had actually come trick-or-treating late and was his last trick-or-treater of the night. So the kids wanted to have some candy before bed. So Ronald and Daneen agreed to allow them 1 piece of candy each. His daughter chose a chocolate bar. Timothy ended up choosing a pixie stick, like one of these 21-inch pixie sticks, which is a massive amount of sugar for a kid.
Wait, 21-inch?
21-inch, almost 2 feet.
That's... Holy shit!
It's a lot of sugar.
Our pixie sticks are like, what?
About a foot?
You can buy the big ones.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And they have like...
They're usually on the floor rather than
the top piece is always stapled on.
Oh.
It's weird, eh?
I kind of want to see these. We're checking those out later.
All right. So, Timothy had an issue getting the powder out because there's a staple at the top. And so Ronald helped him open it and loosen the powder because apparently the powder was kind of condensed together. Mm-hmm. So these probably had been sitting a while. Upon tasting the candy, Timothy complained that it tasted off and more bitter than sweet. So Ronald got him a glass of Kool-Aid so that he could wash out the taste. After finishing the Kool-Aid, Timothy began to feel ill, complained of a stomach ache, and raced to the bathroom where he began to vomit.
Jesus.
As Ronald tried to help his son, Timothy began convulsing and then went limp while Ronald was holding him. Paramedics arrived. Unfortunately, Timothy died en route to hospital less than an hour after eating this candy.
Oh.
So,
not candy.
Timothy's autopsy showed that he died of poisoning, more specifically potassium cyanide poisoning. The authorities started to recover the pixie sticks that had been handed out, so they got one from Elizabeth because they'd been handing to their one daughter, and then the 2 other kids, but then that 5th kid they had to track down the parents for. The police called the parents of the 10-year-old, and they became hysterical because they could not find the goddamn pixie stick. Luckily, so they rushed upstairs to the kid's bedroom and found him unconscious holding the candy. Luckily, the boy had not been able to open the package despite having tried. He was too weak to pull the staple to get the candy open.
Oh.
Too weak?
Yeah.
He must have been, like, really young, I guess.
So,
also, their staples are back then.
We used to just tear them. We didn't bother with the staple.
I feel
they're plastic.
Oh, they're plastic?
Okay. Yeah,
they're not the little ones that you can just pop. Like,
fair enough.
I remember those ones I used to chew on the side.
Like corn?
Yeah, like, no, I just chew it, like, kind of like cud. So you're just, like, chewing the flavor out of it.
Mm-hmm. So, the police investigated the candy, and all 5 have been emptied of the top 2 inches and then refilled with potassium cyanide powder, then resealed with a staple. According to pathologists, the candy that poisoned Timothy had enough to kill 2 adults, but the other candies had enough to kill at least 3, up to 5 adults.
Jesus.
So whoever put these in there was looking for something.
I'm shocked the kid was able to finish
the Kool-Aid.
No, he finished the whole pixie stick.
No, he didn't. I don't think he even went that far because they do test his pixie stick as well.
Oh, okay,
So,
cool.
Still detected it.
The poison candy sent the entire community into an uproar. It eventually hit nationwide coverage. Parents in Deer Park turned up at the police station in order to have their candy searched and tested to see if it was poisoned. The police recovered no other tainted candy, so nothing else out of the ordinary, just these kids.
Single source, folks.
It appeared that only Ronald and his group had received the poison candy, and the police asked Ronald to bring them to the house that he received the candy. Initially, Ronald told him he couldn't remember which house it was. which really seemed really weird because they'd only walked two blocks before turning home because it was raining. The police grew even more suspicious after finding out that none of the houses on the block had handed out candy, because they actually went door to door and asked people, what did you hand out? Like, can you show me the boxes? Things like that. So they took Ronald for a walk around the neighborhood 3 times. The first 2 times he couldn't seem to figure out which house it was, but on the 3rd time they were a lot more firm with him that they needed to find this house, and basically put out a little bit of a threat with this. And so eventually he led him to the house that he said that he had gotten it from, and the home was owned by a man named Courtney Melvin, who was an air traffic controller at William P. Hobby Airport. Melvin wasn't home at the time, so the police went to his workplace and arrested him in front of his coworkers.
Oh, Jesus.
So case closed, right? We got the guy.
I'm still asking if he's hairy. Was he actually hairy, though? Because that was a big, important part. I know it's a joke, but it's also not a joke.
So Melvin had been working the night of Halloween and did not get home until well after 11 p.m., which was confirmed by 200 other airport employees. So he has a rock-solid alibi. His wife and daughter had been home, but ran out of candy, so they turned out the light and didn't answer the door. So if there was a man opening the damn door with a hairy arm, I'm certain, unless the wife's really hairy.
Wow. She didn't shave her legs for a while.
So, Ronald, at the funeral, Ronald had actually, written a song about Jesus and Timothy joining the Lord in heaven, and grew agitated when his grieving family wouldn't stay up late to watch the recording of the performance that being broadcasted on television. So he really, really was into the attention as well. So investigators turned their focus away from a stranger having done it to Ronald himself. Doing some digging, they realized that despite the public image that Ronald portrayed, he was actually really struggling, way more than even his wife knew. First of all, Ronald's take-home salary was roughly $150 a week, which wasn't much back then. It was barely enough to cover their, payments and food. Barely enough to keep a roof over their head and barely enough to keep them fed. Also, it came up that Texas State Optical suspected Ronald of theft, and he was on the brink of losing his job. In fact, Ronald has a really hard time keeping a job. He worked for 21 different companies in the past 10 years.
Wow. Every 6 months, give or take.
Jesus.
So, it turned out that he had plunged the entire family into over $100,000 in debt, which is $520,000 in 2019 currency. So over $500,000 in debt. His car was close to being repossessed. He had defaulted on a pack of bank loans, and his house was about to be foreclosed on. It also turned out that on January 1974, Ronald had taken out life insurance policies on both his children for $10,000, which would be $51,842 in 2019 money. About a month before Halloween, he had taken out an additional $20,000 on both children. And then, despite the fact that the insurance company was like, you really shouldn't do this. And then days before Halloween, he took out another $20,000 on each child. So for a man who's struggling with this, he seems very concerned about the lives of his children.
You're going to say longevity, right?
Yeah, the longevity of his children. So all of these policies were all without Danien's knowledge. The morning of Timothy's death, Ronald had called at 9:30 in the morning. He called the insurance company to find out how he goes about collecting the funds. So, suspicious as this was, it was even more condemning when it was discovered that Ronald had visited a chemical store in Houston and inquired about purchasing cyanide powder. He did not purchase anything because he found out the smallest quantity he could purchase was roughly 5 pounds. I just want to stop for a second and be like, the smallest amount of cyanide I can buy.
Jesus.
I guess that's so that you would really have to dump a lot of this out,
You know what what occurred to me, too, is...
it makes it crazy easy to trace.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, you could tell that it must have been him who did it because his kids were the only ones who were able to get the staple open because he helped his son.
Yeah.
But the other kids were too weak to get the staple out. And then they caught it really early, right?
Yeah. They caught it within the same night because he died within hours. Like,
exactly. So, like, Jesus Christ.
So this kind of sealed him as the perpetrator in the minds of the investigator, who put the theory that Ronald poisoned the candy to kill his kids and collect the money, but because his daughter had chosen a fucking chocolate bar instead of the pixie stick, she managed to survive. In fact, Daneen reported that the pixie stick wasn't even Timothy's first choice, that Ronald tried to force both kids to take the pixie stick, and they had actually chosen different things entirely, and Elizabeth just did not want to take the pixie stick. So he dispersed the other candies to just cover it up. Because then if, like, 5 kids get hit that aren't all part of the same family, well then, who knows? Like,
yeah.
So despite not knowing where Ronald acquired the poison, they arrested him on November 5th, 1974. He was indicted of capital murder and 4 cases of attempted murder. Ronald pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his trial began on May 5th, 1975. The state brought forward a chemist who was an acquaintance of Ronald's who testified that in the summer of 1973, Ronald had inquired about cyanide and how much would be fatal. So he's already asking somebody about this. A chemical supply salesman also testified that Ronald had contacted him on how to purchase cyanide.
He must have been desperate because there's way too much evidence against him.
Friends and co-workers also stated that Ronald seemed to have an unusual interest in cyanide and how much was lethal for a person. This is a lot of people.
Like, why wouldn't you just look
Are
at
you just going around me like, cyanide?
Like, you gotta think, right? Like, if he was being framed, like, what a coincidence. I just got really interested in the field of cyanide.
Yeah.
And I want to check out what it's like. Hey, have you heard of cyanide?
And I love that it starts in the summer of 1973.
Yeah.
Like, I guess he must have gotten the idea then and was like, well, how do I acquire it?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And he wasn't subtle. That's what I mean. I think he was just really desperate because he was not subtle.
So,
might not be intelligent.
His brother-in-law and sister-in-law, so I'm guessing Daneen's brother or sister and her spouse or whatever, stated that Ronald had said at the funeral that he would use the insurance money to take the family on a long vacation and to purchase a few other items. Ronald's defense is really interesting. I just went through the fact that there are no confirmed reported cases of mad poisoners out there trying to poison children, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that has never happened before. His defense was that this happens all the time. That's why we get these advertisements all the time. So it must be some mad poisoner out there. So he literally used an urban legend as his defense.
So is the urban legend older than this?
Yes, slightly. It was around before this, but it wasn't as prominent.
Interesting.
So it was a really weak defense, but the media picked up the case and reported on it heavily. And the press dubbed Ronald O'Brien the Candyman. I was going to call this episode the Candyman, but there's actually another serial killer that has a really fucking interesting name. And his name was the Candyman, and I was like, I do not want to have this confusion.
Plus, we don't want to get it mixed up with the 1980s horror movie, Candyman.
Yeah. We'll have to talk about that at some point.
Nor do we want it to be confused with the 1990s board game, Candyland.
Candyland.
I mean...
So with such a solid defense, you would think that the jury would need some time to deliberate on this. So, on June 3rd, 1975, the jury deliberated for 46 minutes. And I'm going to...
It's a coffee break.
Well, I'm just going to tell you this right now. It takes about an hour to fill out the forms for the verdict. They all went in there and just went, fucking guy's guilty. Like...
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yep.
So...
Sign.
They all came back with a verdict of guilty on all counts. It took less than 71 minutes for the jury to then sentence him to death.
Oh, Jesus.
So, I just picture him being, like, sitting there thinking, we got this, and then all of a sudden, like, they come back in, like, 45 minutes and then be like, guilty of all 5 of these counts, and then an hour and a half later be like, and by the way, you're fucking dying. Like,
Yeah.
So Daneen swiftly divorced Ronald and then remarried. She did get remarried later, and her new husband adopted Elizabeth, so their daughter.
Oh, good.
So Ronald was sent to Ellis 1 unit in Huntsville, Texas. At the time, this was the only death row unit in Texas. State law literally said you had to go here. The prison was designed by George Beto, an expert penologist, professor, and Lutheran minister, to be the strictest prison in the system. I'm not surprised by the fact that he was a Lutheran and he wanted the most strict prison in the system. Like, he literally must have sat there and just went, you know what? I just want them to think that this is the most brutal place in the world. Brimstone and hellfire. Like, so, Michael Berryhill, an author of a few books on actual prison stuff, said, quote, "You had the toughest convicts, and the general philosophy was that you needed to be the toughest warden. Wallace Park was assigned to keep the lid on Ellis. The inmates in the prison were restless, and there were work stoppages and strikes. And with the judge's justice opinion, there was an air of expectancy that the brutality in these terrible conditions would end." So I was looking up lists of the people who served time here or were on death row here or were executed here. And they are so high profile and so, like, notable that they each have their own episode that we'll have to cover at some point.
Oh, geez.
There's such interesting tales.
Carnival of killers, huh?
Yeah. There was even one that I was like, well, the only thing he has that really going for him is that he, you know, basically tried to commit suicide by hanging himself on a gate. Like, I could talk about that. But then I looked into his crime and I was like, no, this is too good. Like,
that's an episode.
Yeah.
That's an episode. God, why you all you fuckers so interesting? That's an episode.
some of them have some really great crimes, and even their backstories were hilarious. So I was like, I have to do these episodes. Like,
when he says great, he means from a study point of view.
Yeah, not like
he doesn't
it was
condone.
fantastic. Like,
It's not admiration.
it's not approved behavior, but
Right after he did this, he did a triple axle backflip and then karate kicked a dude in the face. It was amazing.
honestly, I do have one where a guy tries to fight off police officers with a samurai sword. So I'm just saying, there's a case that's coming up with that.
Yes.
I'm assuming he just got shot.
No.
Really? That's charitable.
No, he had a samurai sword. He could clearly deflect those bullets.
So, surprisingly, Ronald did not do well in prison. He was despised and shunned in prison due to not only killing a child, but his own child.
Yeah.
He was so hated that the inmates petitioned to hold an organized demonstration on the date of his execution.
Wow.
Jesus.
Like, in celebration?
Yes.
We're holding a parade. Like, prisoners are holding a parade to kill this guy.
Some of them wanted to go to witness the execution. Like,
I mean...
these are all death row inmates.
Yeah, I want to be there. I'm gonna fucking watch this guy die.
Listen, I'm a piece of shit. that guy is a fucking piece of shit.
Wow, I almost feel bad about my crime because of how shitty this guy is.
Listen, I was starting to feel remorse, and then I realized how much better I am than him. So the first date of execution was set for August 8th, 1980, but Ronald's lawyers successfully petitioned a stay of execution. A second date of May 25th, 1982 was also postponed. Judge Michael McSpadden. I just love the name. Like, Michael McSpadden.
Is he a spittoon?
So he scheduled...
An Irish spittoon?
So he scheduled a third execution date of October 31st, 1982, the 8th anniversary of the crime, and he even offered to personally drive O'Brien to the death chamber.
Wow. Someone's not biased.
I just love the thought of this guy being like, here's the day, 8 years after you killed your 8-year-old, I will take you there myself. So
Jesus.
It was the first time that Texas was going to execute an inmate by lethal injection. He had originally been convicted of the death penalty to be served out through electrocution in the electric chair, but then the electric chair was deemed unconstitutional. So
yeah, like something like inhumane or something like that.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court delayed the date yet again to give O'Brien a chance to pursue an appeal to seek a new trial. The fourth date was scheduled for March 31st, 1984. O'Brien's lawyers sought a fourth stay on the basis of lethal injection being a cruel and unusual punishment, which is actually almost all death row appeals always eventually have this. Where it
is justified in that the people doing the injections are not trained. They're not nurses.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
And it's not even just that. It's apparently the drug, when it goes in, does feel like it's burning. And sometimes you're not asleep. Because they say that you're supposed to be out first and that whatever. But sometimes they state that it takes longer for them to be knocked out, but the drug's already been injected. So then they feel their veins burning.
Yeah, they're not calculated by weight. They don't know what they're doing. They often get the drug order wrong.
They hit the wrong places. It gets injected into the wrong...
If it goes into your musculature, now all that's burning.
Yeah.
Right.
So on March 28th, so he's supposed to be executed on March 31st. March 28th, a federal judge rejected the request. Fuck you.
No one's gonna fucking be on this guy's side.
Yeah. So on March 31st, 1984, around 12:18, he was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit. His final statement, O'Brien maintained his innocence, stating that the death penalty was wrong. He added, quote, I forgive all, I do mean all, of those who have been involved in my death. God bless you all, and may God's best blessings be always yours, end quote.
I feel like I've heard this before.
So, during the execution, a crowd of 300 demonstrators had gathered outside of the prison. So there was 300 demonstrators for his death, and then there was also other demonstrators that were not part of this 300 that were against the death penalty. The moment he was declared dead, and it was yelled out to the crowd, the demonstrators that were for his death then started throwing candy at the other demonstrators, yelling trick or treat.
Wow.
Keep it classy.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So Ronald O'Brien is buried at Forest Park East End Cemetery in Webster, Texas, and Timothy is buried in Forest Lark Lawndale Cemetery in Houston. Ronald also went down as the man who killed Halloween, the Candyman, and the Pixie Stick Killer. That's the end of our episode.
Jesus. Well, not the end. It's the end of your story.
Yeah, the end of my story.
Wait, come on. We don't just end the episode like that.
I'm done. I'm getting out of here.
It's like one of those unsatisfying television series endings where it's like, okay, and then they just say one quick line and then it's done.
It's The Sopranos.
I guess so. I haven't seen that.
It ends mid-sentence.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So, thoughts?
I mean, incredibly straightforward. What a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Is there, any... he never came to terms with it or admitted anything?
Nope. He always maintained his innocence right up to that very end.
I hope that the person who did the lethal injection was untrained.
Yeah.
No one licensed will do it. It defies medical licensing laws. So it's always the case.
The point is, I hope it did burn.
You hope he suffers.
Yes.
They do get some medical training when they're doing it. It's 24 hours of medical training just on how to put this in. And it's by a doctor, but the doctor will not... Normally, doctors will not do this because of the fact that it goes against the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
However, it's weird because there are times where doctors have been called to be part of rifle squads and stuff like that, and sometimes they participated in that, which I feel is really weird.
I bet you it has to do with their license, because if they use their medical training to hurt someone, then it's a problem with their license. If they have to be a part of a firing squad, that's a military.
Also, firing squads are however many lined up, only one is the real bullet. The rest is all squibs.
It is arguably far more humane.
Oh,
yeah, and in Utah, you can still select the firing squad as a death.
Huh.
That's
Utah for you.
Of course, Utah.
I think Florida still has electric chair on their death, because I know Ted Bundy was killed in the 1990s with the electric chair. But
I feel like
Bundy.
Florida doesn't
Ted
count
Bundy.
for any standards.
But I think that it's very hard to get it because of the fact that it is appeal bait. So I know that hanging is also still one in Wyoming or something like that.
Really?
So you can still be hung.
I think
Sorry, hanged, not hung.
Yeah, I think we should all go back to the guillotine.
Yeah. Well, your head apparently still stays alive for a minute and a half after that. So
yeah, and that way you can get your final words in.
You wouldn't have the oxygen to say anything.
Exactly. Get your final words in. See, he gets me.
Do you have any final words? Sling.
No, it's in the basket. He goes,
That basically means you can laugh at a headless corpse for a minute, and they'll comprehend it. Is that what you're telling me?
yes!
See, that's the one thing that's always terrified me, is that I saw this study once upon a time that you can live, that you're still conscious in your body for up to 25 minutes after your death, and you're dead. And that's all I keep thinking to myself is these stories that I read about.
Who is telling you this?
This actually is a study where they did it on brainwaves and so on.
Yeah, okay, but brainwaves being one thing and actual consciousness is a dramatically
Your fucking brain is still active. There's still some sort of consciousness after you die because
but your
it's
muscles
like a
twitch
machine.
after you die. It's just after effects.
Yeah, but you're also I can't, with our mind being like computers, I can't see it just shutting down entirely.
No, that's why there's still residuals. When you turn off a computer, there's still residual electricity.
Yeah, so there has to be some sort of
That's not consciousness.
After
the
death.
computer isn't on, nor can you turn it on with that residual energy.
All right.
Think about how much energy it takes to run your brain. If you just cut off the power source, you're not going to last long. If you lose blood flow to your brain for a few minutes, you will have permanent brain damage the rest of your life.
But you can still,
the
but
body
you're not
attached.
technically declared brain dead until after 4 minutes of no oxygen.
Yeah, but that's a definition rather than anything in practice.
Okay.
all right. So that's our show. As usual, don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, review. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at BAChaosJar. Follow me on Twitter at I'm Glad You Asked _. Follow us on Facebook at Chaos Jar Podcast, which is also the name of our YouTube channel. And you can be a patron at a patron in the show notes.
Also poop.
All right, everyone. Good night.